In this episode of IT SPARC Cast, a ransomware proprietor gets extradited, Microsoft Link causes a nerd fight, and you need to patch your Palo Alto right now. Welcome to IT SPARC Cast. I'm your host, John Barker.
And I'm your host, Lou Schmidt.
It's Friday, November 22nd.
Is everybody having fun?
IT SPARC Cast is a digest of the IT news over the last week with insights, opinions, and a little sarcasm from two experts with over 20 years of experience in IT or working for IT vendors. Lou, what did Yoda say when he saw himself in 4K for the first time?
What did Yoda say?
HDMI.
That's it. You're getting a nerd fight today.
Oh, and quick programming note, we're going to be off next week for the Thanksgiving holiday in the United States. We'll return on Wednesday, December 4th for the next episode of the IT SPARC Cast Deep Dive, where we're talking about IT supporting remote work. And then we'll be back on Friday, December 6th for more news from the world of enterprise IT. And now, the news bites.
You know what I wonder about, John?
What's that?
Does anybody ever get busted for these cyber attacks?
You know, you just happen to mention what I'm about to talk about. So we've had a significant development in cybersecurity enforcement. 42-year-old Russian national, I'm gonna mangle this name, Evgenii Ptitsyn, has been extradited from South Korea to the United States to face charges related to the ransomware known as Phobos. According to Dark Reading, Ptitsyn is accused of leading an international cybercrime operation that utilized Phobos ransomware to target over 1,000 victims worldwide, including entities within the United States. The operation reportedly extorted more than $16 million in ransom payments. The U.S. Department of Justice alleges that Ptitsyn and his associates provided access to the ransomware to other criminals who would then infiltrate victim networks, exfiltrate and encrypt data. They would then demand a ransom under the threat of public disclosure. Ptitsyn is facing multiple charges, and if convicted, he could receive up to 20 years in prison for each wire fraud count, 10 years for each computer hacking count, and 5 years for conspiracy to commit computer fraud and abuse. So that will be a lot of years.
Yeah, except do any of them serve this time? We've looked at the international scene. We've seen stupid people do stupid things in the American United States domain, and we've seen stupid people do stupid things from America in the Russian domain. I don't bet that this individual serves more than a year before they get swapped for somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, there's a very good chance of a criminal swap or something like that with Russia, as they have somebody that we want and so forth. But we'll have to see how that turns out. But at the end of the day, this just goes to show you the kind of things to expect from ransomware. I've got a good friend of mine that used to work for a publishing company, and they got hit by a ransom attack, and they kept it quiet, so it didn't get reported out. So that's why I'm not using the name. But they ended up paying the fine in order to get their data back, because they felt that even with the FBI involved, which the FBI was involved, that they weren't going to get their data back in time, and they were losing money just every day that they weren't operational. So they went ahead and paid it. This is the kind of thing this is why we have cybersecurity insurance, but this is also why cybersecurity insurance is now really enforcing rules to make sure that the companies are following some best practices. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of rules, you really should follow your rules.
Absolutely. So why don't you talk about what's going on in Pennsylvania?
Yeah. This one's particularly interesting in light of the fact that we did a 3-part series covering AI in K through 12. If you haven't seen that, I highly encourage you to go check that out. This was not part of it because this is adjunctive. So let me tell you what happened here. There was an explicit deepfake scandal. It shut down a Pennsylvania school. This comes to us via Slashdot. An AI-generated nude photo scandal shut down a Pennsylvania private school. This one is a classic example of why you need to set policies and you need to follow the policies, because you're going to have serious problems if you don't. So apparently a student, an outcry erupted after a single student created sexually explicit AI images of nearly 50 female classmates at Lancaster County Day School, according to the Lancaster Online. Police arrested the student in August, but the school knew from November 2023 that this was happening. So it's not like this individual just popped out 50 of these all in one go. They went out, they did a few, they got some reactions, they went out. This is typical stupid teenager stuff. We were all at some point in our development stupid teenagers, right? But the challenge is this. The police arrested the student, right, in August for this. The school knew. So the parents said, rightly, it went on too long. And they filed a court summons threatening to sue last week unless the school leaders responsible for mishandling the response resigned within 48 hours. So eventually they ended up doing that. But the problem is there was so little transparency over what had happened, what the response was. The folks that did resign resigned under pressure 2 days later than the deadline. So the parents are pushing ahead with the lawsuit. Now, what does this have to do with you? Well, some of our folks here watching do administer school districts in public spaces, right? If you're in corporate, this doesn't get you off the hook, though. If you find out about this stuff, we have seen stuff like this happen in corporate. The infamous thing is people's, usually guys, sending pictures of their privates through email. We've all heard about it. We've all heard the HR stories. When you set up one, make sure you have a policy for this. If HR doesn't have a policy or you're not working with them to establish policy, you should be with the ones working with them on this, by the way.
Yeah, I think this is easier to deal with in the corporate world because you're not dealing with the really sensitive nature of children. And as somebody who has 2 children in grade school, this is something that's really scary. And I think that, when I was a kid, bullying was a thing, but cyberbullying is a whole different level. And things like this can follow you for a long, long time. And it's really, really scary as a parent. And the fact that a school system might have hidden it is even worse. This is still being, taken through the court systems and all that stuff. So we're not saying that a school system did hide it, but if there's a chance that they did, I wouldn't want to be any part of that. So if you are part of a school system, you have to realize that in that case, you might be legally charged against, for what you've done, what you've hidden in this case. And that's something that would go on your record and just like all kinds of bad things. And, we've talked about this when it comes to CISOs becoming the new, CFOs as far as legal obligation to tell the truth. No matter what your position is in a situation like this, you've got to come clean. Even I don't care if the superintendent's telling you to shut this stuff down. That's not something you can do.
The second that this becomes known to you, the very second you see an email, timeline's running.
100%.
You got to jump on this immediately.
All right, let's move on to something a little more positive, a little more fun. So we've got a new section that we call Nerd Fight.
Nerd Fight.
All right, so as we were going through our show notes, Lou and I were talking about this next article, and we realized that we have a disagreement here. So we wanted to try a new section called Nerd Fight, where I'll give you the news story, and then Lou and I are going to talk about why the other one is wrong. Specifically,
by the way, he's the wrong one.
I don't think so, bud.
Totally is.
Anyway, so according to a blog that I read on Microsoft.com, where they just announced a bunch of new things at their Ignite conference, the one that caught my attention was the Windows 365 Link. This is a compact cloud-based mini PC designed to seamlessly integrate with the Windows 365 service. That's their cloud-based service that is running Windows in the cloud. The device enables users to access the cloud PC from any location, enhancing flexibility and security. Now, this box has a compact design, about the size of an Apple TV or the new Mac Mini. It's fanless. It fits in the palm of your hand, making it highly portable and space efficient. This device has a dual 4K monitor support. It includes Wi-Fi 6E. It includes 4 USB ports, Bluetooth 5.3, a DisplayPort adapter, and Ethernet. So this thing can plug into anything. It can connect to just about anything. It has no local storage. It reduces the risk associated with physical data loss. It also features passwordless login via Microsoft Authenticator, passkeys, and FIDO2 security keys. This thing's expected in April of 2025 in the US, Canada, UK, Germany, Austria, New Zealand, and Japan, and is expected to be released at $349 US. So it's a very affordable solution.
Okay,
now
so
the
you
other
think this thing is cool?
I do, but one thing I want to say is that they're also allowing third parties to make their versions of these, and that's where I think it gets interesting. And what this is to me is VDI, virtual desktop, coming back. And the reason I think it's cool is that VDI struggled for two reasons. One is there was a lot of infrastructure required on the networking side back when networking was not as fast as it is today. And there wasn't a demand for it. The reason you did VDI was for easier management of the desktops, easier resets and things like that. But it was always a pain to access. This to me seems like, now that we're talking about remote work, having the nth level of control over the desktop, in this case, a virtual desktop, is something that I think could really make remote work possible. Now, Lou, what's your take?
1992 called and it wants its X terminals back. Okay, dude, I did this stuff back on when I worked on a particle accelerator for a living at Stanford, using NCD terminals. There is nothing new about this. So let me go ahead and counter this. Understand that this is an extension of something we've been doing for a long time. Have you forgotten the Java Station or the Sunray?
Nope.
Bad John. We've done this before. So let's take a look at what else we could do with this announcement. You have a $349 dongle with basic computing support that can do this. Now, Microsoft also offers the Windows 365 servers essentially on any platform. It's in a browser. So why don't you spend $80 for a Raspberry Pi 5 that pretty much has all of this stuff? If you want Wi-Fi 6E or 7, you can plug in a USB dongle and then run it in a window and have the ability to run a whole bunch of other stuff beside. What's the advantage to this?
So I think the advantage is the lockdown and the fact you can't run anything else on it. This is not intended for somebody like you and me or most of our viewers, but this is intended for the IT department to give something to the average information worker that just needs to do word processing, PowerPoint, web browsing, email, things along those lines, where latency isn't a significant issue. And I don't want them doing anything else on the device that connects to work. And
so this is sort of like WinFrame that came out with NT 3.51 that got incorporated into NT4 as Windows Terminal Service. So I think it's interesting. I think in call center type applications, and I know that there's a lot of folks that work remote. I've had friends who've done this, where they send you a laptop or you have to go buy a laptop from them, but it's not normally that expensive. It might have some applications. It's not really going to save you any money because you still got to have a display. You still got to have a keyboard. You still got to have, at that point, a cheap Chromebook, which is, you can lock those things down and they can run the Microsoft 365 service, is probably better than this thing is.
Well, so here's why I think the opening this up to third parties is going to be the interesting part, because then there's no reason you couldn't do a laptop form factor with this. You could have it with a display built in and a trackpad and a keyboard, and it's portable. And you know what? Include a 5G modem that's paid for by the company. And now you truly are able to work from anywhere. And again, I think the big deal is I don't want any possibility of you running something else on this device, which then when you connect up to the cloud service has the potential to interfere and inject or monitor or anything else. I want a completely, utterly locked down device. And once you get into Windows, then you can do whatever you need to do and work whatever your IT policy is about installing something. But this device in the field has no chance of breaking in a way like because of what you've installed. You could have a hardware failure, but you're not going to have, I installed this widget and now everything's working in a way that I can't control. That's
so
not
different,
that. Go ahead.
Okay, but how different is this from a lockdown Citrix machine?
It's not. So this is much closer to Citrix than it would be to the Chromebook, because with the Chromebook, I could probably find a way to get around, some of the controls that you might have put in place. But I think this is very much like Citrix, except Citrix always had problems just because of how do you connect up to it? And in many cases, you're connecting up from a device with an OS. You were using software on a Windows system or whatever it might be, and then you were connecting up to a remote system. And I think that has more security vulnerabilities than a absolute dumb device. This is the definition of the 2024 dumb terminal.
Wait a minute. Did you just say security and a Microsoft product in the same sentence?
All right. Well, you got me there, Lou.
I'm backing up the win on this one.
No.
There is an OS on it, and somebody will crack it. You watch.
Well, that's probably true. Let's look at the other side of this. What does it take to lock down an environment when you have less control? I'll give an example. 2 years ago, I got so frustrated with the policies and the software being installed on my MacBook Pro, and the battery wouldn't last more than 2 hours because of everything that it was doing, and it was scanning every little thing. And I understand why that was being done, but it made it difficult for me to get work done. So that's when I went out and bought the MacBook Air that I'm using now. I bought it on my own, and that became my work laptop. That's a problem.
I did the same thing, and it was a problem.
It's a problem for security and if IT had found out that I was doing that, then they would have had a real issue with that. So, but think about what has to be done for remote work. So you probably should have to provide some sort of VPN system. You need to be providing antivirus software. You need to be providing a lockdown to make sure that you don't install Fortnite or whatever it is on that device. There's just so much work and effort. This eliminates a lot of that effort. That's why I think this is a game changer. Because one of the things that we keep talking about is how to support remote work, and why all these companies think remote work is failing. And I think that a lot of it has to do with securing the endpoints.
But why do you want to secure the endpoint if you can secure an instance? So the one thing that Windows 365 does give you is a lockdown browser instance with the same thing. And if I can control what inputs I allow into that, which they can do, I get the same thing. I can run on existing hardware. I can run on old hardware that you've already depreciated. So why are you spending more money on this when you probably have a stack of laptops lying around you've already depreciated? You just load the basics on them, or a basic Linux, lock the dang thing down. You can load Chrome on these things now. Lock it down with a control console, allow it only to establish the VPN connection and open up to that website. Done.
Yeah, well, yet again, Lou, you're wrong. So we want to hear from you.
I'm sorry, you're wrong.
What do you guys think? Is this a good idea, or is this a bad idea? Is Lou right, or am I right? And why am I right?
So, or are we both right, depending on what your deployment model is?
Maybe there is a happy medium, and maybe Lou and I can be friends again. So with that, we're going to move on to the CVE of the week.
Let's talk about the CVE of the week. The CVE of the week, once again, we had a number to choose from this week, which is concerning in itself. But there is one right now I'd really like to highlight. If you're running a Palo Alto firewall, there is an active exploit right now, 0-day exploit. It was patched. There was a patch set that just came out. I believe it was this week. Vulnerability for PanOS 11.2, 11.1, 11.0, 10.2, and 10.1. Let's talk about the two vulnerabilities that are nasty on this thing. So the security firm reported learning about the potential 0-day in early November, possibly after seeing it in a sales offer on a cybercrime forum. All right, so this one, that's a good way to detect, but oh my God, by the time you've seen it for sale, it's actively being exploited. And it was confirmed in the wild exploitation of a new vulnerability on November 15th. So right now we're out there, it's being exploited. One of the 0-day attacks right now is CVE 2024-0012. It's a critical authentication bypass flaw that allows an unauthenticated attacker who has access to the PanOS management interface to gain admin privileges. This exploit is 9.3 on the oh crap-o-meter. So get on it. I mean, they're going to get in. If you are exposed to the internet with your firewall management, you're done. All right. So we'll talk about this. Let me tell you about the second one, right? This is very, very critical. There's a secondary one, which is a second 0-day, apparently spotted in the same attack. So the first one gets you in on admin. This flaw allows the unauthenticated, it allows the security hole has been described as a medium severity privilege escalation. It allows an attacker who has admin permissions to gain root. So the first one gets you admin, second one gets you root. The 1-2 punch is really, really nasty. They have a CVE score of 6.9 on that one. My take on it is, wow. You know, it should have the same score as the other one, because if you get one, you're going to get the other. And that's it. If you root, it is absolutely game over. So one thing I'd really like to emphasize, if you've done this stuff before, you're scratching your head and you're saying, how in the world are people getting to this management interface? So a shout out to Palo Alto. Read the instructions. If you are in security and you don't know this, you need to learn this right now. Your internal management interfaces, one, should be internal, never exposed to the internet. Two, should be whitelisted. You whitelist them only to IP addresses from known good people. And then the third thing that is not explicitly stated, but I'm going to do it, you have a VPN you trust to get into that system. All right. If you have done those three things, this bug you've got a patch, but this bug will not impact your network. Now, what's scary is they did a scan of this, and out of the scan on the internet, last week there were 11,000 exposed systems. This week there are only 6,000. So apparently the word got out, but 11,000 systems were exposed. This is security 101, kids. Yeah. Lock down your interfaces. You really need to do this. If you have any questions about this, come talk to us. We've done this before. John,
yeah. So, you mentioned VPN. I actually think this is a great sales case for zero trust, right? So zero trust is something that we're going to be talking more and more about, especially during our remote work sessions. And I feel that is becoming critical and a required component to your IT tech stack. If you're not looking at zero trust today, you need to start looking at zero trust. Zero trust allows you to lock down to the nth degree and not just say, okay, they're in through the VPN, so they can, whatever happens after that is fine. Zero trust really locks it down. And I would really start looking at various ZTNA solutions from various vendors. Don't just go with whatever your current networking or security vendor is, but shop around, figure out what the features are, and so forth. Again, we'll talk more about that over time.
Yeah, and this is one of those situations where absolutely, if one vendor, and every vendor goes through challenges like this. We're not beating up on Palo. We beat up on Microsoft. We beat up on Fortinet. We're going to beat up on anybody who has this kind of thing. But every vendor does this, and one of the best tricks to reduce your overall exposure is to have a multi-vendor strategy.
The other thing that strikes me about this is that as our attackers get more and more sophisticated, the chaining of attacks and the chaining of vulnerabilities, because that second one with the CVE score of 6.9 6.9 is not minimized, but it's not, oh my gosh, I got to deal with this right away kind of thing, except for the fact that it's exposed by another vulnerability, which then makes it actually, in reality, more of a 9 dot something level vulnerability. So that's why you need to be looking at a broader scope. And it could be that it could be 2 different vulnerabilities in 2 completely different products, or it could be 4 or 5 vulnerabilities that once somebody figures out how to chain them together, then you get completely pwned. And that's why patching, and you all know this, patching is critical, but you got to make sure you're on top of these things and looking at them. So,
and we know the challenges. The challenges with patching is that the service has to go down.
Yeah.
Now there were some, as a side note, there were some announcements at the Microsoft Ignite talking about Windows hot patching, which is something that Linux has been doing for a number of years. Microsoft appears to have finally be looking at it. I don't believe it's something we can do on the Pan OS boxes. It's theoretically possible, but usually you have to flush the buffers in the forwarding plane. And once you've done that, you might as well just reboot the box. So that is, and I know that is huge. It's a huge pain for us, right? Yeah. Usually you've got to pull a maintenance window at midnight. You've got to make sure there's no critical tasks like backup tasks or something crossing over from the data center, or pause those tasks, which becomes a whole huge thing to do. But versus getting owned, now that we've had our little geek fight, we're all feeling better. There's something we're keeping an eye on. John, do you want to talk about that? This is neat.
Yeah, so I'm going to call this Geek Watch. So there's a number of things that we're going to keep an eye on, and we'll let you know what we're seeing. But I found a guy on X. His name is Alex Zizkind, and he goes by Digital IX. And he's built a cluster of 5 M4 Mac Minis running EXO. And then from there, he's running various LLMs and he's testing the performance on them. And he's still in the process of getting it all set up. So I was hoping that we would have better results for today to be able to report out on it. But go check out at Digital IX on X and see if this is interesting for you. He actually has a whole bunch of different things that he writes about and he puts up on YouTube. Really interesting guy. But what's interesting is that these 5 M4 Mac Minis together are drawing less energy than his full AI rig, running a high-end graphics card and all of those things, by far less energy. And he expects that the performance will far exceed the capabilities of that rig. So think about whether that's for AI purposes, for crypto mining or whatever. We may have found a way to really get a more efficient energy usage, which is always the problem. That's the biggest problem with AI or crypto mining, is how much energy you're burning. And this might be a good way around that. So we'll keep reporting out on that as we hear more from this guy. Again, Alex Zizkind at Digital IX on X.
I'm a little skeptical about the claim that he's going to get better performance in a dedicated vector processor, but I would really like to be proven wrong on this.
And I think what he's saying is per watt of power consumed, you're getting more compute power. And that's what we'll end up seeing. I think it's interesting. The clustering technology that he's using, the XO stuff, is really interesting. So I'm definitely going to keep an eye on it.
And we're watching for you.
We are. So that's going to cover this week's episode. We couldn't do this podcast without listeners like you, and we would love to hear what you think. Do you have a topic you want us to cover? Do you have an opinion on the Microsoft Link device and why I'm right? Send email to feedback@itsparkcast.com. That's feedback at itsparkcast.com or at itsparkcast on X. Be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. That's really going to help this channel grow. Tell your friends about us. Tell your colleagues about us. Maybe they'll be able to learn some of the great things that we hope that you're learning from us as well. And as I mentioned earlier, we are going to be off next week for the Thanksgiving holiday. We will return on Wednesday, December 4th for that IT SPARC Cast deep dive where we go deeper into IT support for remote work. And then we'll be back on Friday, December 6th for more news and opinions from the world of enterprise IT. Thanks for listening.
But we promise to think about you while we're eating turkey.
100%.